Greetings, one and all, and welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I said it right this week. I didn't say Mornings of Mischief. And I'm joined, of course, by Doctor and author Adega Outlaw.
Very good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Lady Mist, our guardian of the void, is here, ladies and gentlemen. The Catman, a.k.a. Dee Myers, Mark the Infinitely Tired, and Chris Persia, the Bash Brother Wrenches, are here. Purple Valkyrie, good evening. Purple Day Bob, how are you doing? Andrew 46 and 2. Pat S, good evening. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone doing out there? I hope you're having a great night. Gun Bunny, hello, Gun Bunny. So good to see you. And we have got one hell of a show for you guys tonight. Adega's got something in the works, and I have a story to share with you. Hopefully it will be good, because I don't really have time to check it.
Dun, dun, dun.
It looks good, though. Looks good. Paragraph looks good.
Oh, I wish we had more people here tonight, because I don't think the news that, and there'll be people to watch it later, but the news that I'm bringing is something that was, we've talked about times when the news has been manipulated and the truth doesn't get out, or there are those covering for bad things that happen. And I am going to bring up something that really disturbs me, because there is a push around, and we can see it in several countries where you never thought it would happen before, where this idea that socialism or communism are things acceptable. Even Japan, or not Japan, Disney, with their movie Mulan, went to a place they call Zhaojing, which actually is where the Uyghurs live, or used to, by there. You guys will know the lay of the land better than I do. I know the stories, but names, of course, are going to throw me off. But there's an entire Muslim population being sterilized, forcefully mutilated to organ harvest and put into slave labor. And it's being covered up, and Disney profits from it. Gotta love that, huh? Go get your movie memorabilia. But every single time, a similar type of government has been set up, from Pol Pot, Mao, Stalin, Nazis, which are socialists. All of them caused the death of thousands to 100,000s and millions. And the story I wanted to share with you is one that very few know about. And because there were people in play at the time, and still to some degree, who wish to have this information hid. They don't want people to know what happened. Some of you, I would imagine, already know what the word Holodomor is. Yeah. Holodomor is a Ukrainian word for death by starvation. And none of these pictures are in any particular order, and it's fine that Loki shows whatever he does. But basically what happened, Stalin came into power, and the people were thinking, yes, revolution for the people, and workers unite. And one of their big slogans was, those who work, eat. And they had posters of people that had big spoons that were coming to beg. That's an actual monument there. And they were being forced away because they wouldn't work, so they wouldn't eat. But they didn't tell you what they did in Ukraine. See, Ukraine at the time, this is 1922 when the Soviets first started taking over, and they weren't quite cooperating. So when 32 came around, this is before we started seeing all this stuff happening with the Jews in Nazi Germany. Stalin had enough. Ethnically, obstinately, the Ukrainians, 2/3 of them were home farmers. They could feed millions. They were very good at it. And you remember what this girl is holding. It's important. The Stalin and his government didn't like the fact that these people owned their own property, didn't like the fact that they weren't willing to give up their farms to become part of the party. They called them a word, it's Ukrainian. Actually, I think this one's Russian. I don't know the exact pronunciation, but it's basically a kuruk, or like a raven that is a no-good bird that just goes and pecks off of the leavings of others. A scavenger. And that's the name that they started calling these people. And so Stalin sent in groups to tell these people, you are now going to be part of the communist regime. This one's important too, and we'll get back to that one. You are going to be part of our collectives, and you are going to work or you're not going to eat. And these farmers knew what they were doing. They knew how to feed people. But they weren't becoming communists, good little citizens, and they were also Ukrainians, which Stalin didn't like, so he sent in the siege forces and even used some of the local people. The idea was to force death by starvation. It wasn't forcing compliance. They took everything. Like these animals here, work animals, they were already starving because all the crops, all the foodstuffs were being taken forcefully and shipped off to other parts of the Soviet Union. And the people there were forced to starve. The children, when they would go to school, they were being told it was a bad harvest. Everyone is suffering, and Stalin is doing his best to save the people. And in fact, they had a great harvest, but it was all taken. I have looked at a couple hundred stories of things that had happened, but before we get into that, I want to read to you, because this was hid, and here's just an idea of why. The cover-up didn't just happen in the USSR. The New York Times, how much do you trust them? The New York Times published long articles calling the Ukraine famine mostly bunk. Here's the quote: You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. The man writing them, Walter Duranty, had seen the horrors of the Holodomor firsthand, but had been pressured into silence and lies. For an article that covered up a genocide, he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. Can you believe that? This man got money, fame. In the meantime, people were dying. I might get into some of these stories, but basically, after a period of time, the people started to become very, very hungry. There were some families that were wise, and they hid foodstuffs wherever they could. But also, the locals that turned against their own people, as well as the siege forces that came in, were relentless. They would break out every window in a home, break down the doors, tear up floorboards, everything, to find food and take it from them, everything. Then they took all of their linens. And after that, if they had farm animals, they made them drown all of them. And if they didn't, the men were shipped to Siberia, the women were beaten, and the children would starve. And this image that he's showing here, the estimates were that over 2/3 of each city where these things were going on, the people had died. Many, 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 and I've read a lot of them, stories of daily carts would come by, and with pitchforks, they would throw the bodies into these carts and then go bury them in open pits. However, some of these people were so cruel, they would see kids sitting on the streets. They're too weak to move, we're still alive. They threw them in these carts and buried them alive because they didn't want to come back tomorrow and pick them up. There are stories where this here is one of those, they call them commissars and various different names for the different regions, where these guys would come in, and like the one guy in the hole, they found a buried stash and took it. Everything. Most of those people you see there, except for the ones in uniform, all ended up dead. Because communism had to survive off of the backs of slave labor. As the winter went through, and this goes along with the little statue, people, there was a harvest that they did where they get the wheat and everything, but there were also these machines that they used to harvest weren't quite completely efficient. There was always something that was left. The dogs are having fun, sorry. One sec. So at night, men, women, and children would sneak out past the guards, go to the fields, and take what they called grain stalks. The stalks themselves, whether it have grain on them or not. And they'd bring them home to try and make a stew or a porridge or something to live off of. And in most places, the security would sit there and watch them do this and let them go home. But the next day is when they would go and get them and make a public display of what would happen to disobedience to the rules by severe beating, killing, and sending some of them to Siberia, at least the ones that could go. Towards the end of this, there are some horrific stories where they started noticing, see the little grain stalks that she's holding in her hand. That's based off of a real image. Their parents started noticing that their children would start disappearing. They would search. Some couldn't search. Some of them even put their kids up into orphanages because they were hoping somebody would feed them. But there were thousands upon thousands of people who were executed for barbarism because they would capture these little kids and they ended up in cookpots because they had nothing else to eat and they were easy victims. You can say that it always happens somewhere else, but you never know until you're there. And there were good people who would rather lay down and die than do those horrible things. But still, there's a story of where they found one kid who a 16-year-old, no, she was 18. She was 18-year-old, was executed because she had taken one of the commissar's boys. They found most of him in a pot and his head buried. Yeah, there's stories after story after story. You guys barely even scratching the surface with these. This is the horrors of thinking that equity is preferable to equality, because you can never reach equity, especially when it's done by force. It always means people are going to die. In the end, with the Holodomor, you would think, oh yeah, several 100,000 people may have starved, and that's a horrible loss. And then next door, Hitler killed 6 million. The estimates for what Stalin did just here in the Ukraine is close to 13 million people deliberately starved to death in a type of ethnic cleansing. You're looking at the face of the enemy and what it can do when you hear of people claiming equity instead of equality, when you hear that socialism will work instead of freedom. The stories of these people are finally getting out, where mothers would walk and the children would be left alone for days while they would walk 150 miles to sell their last pair of earrings and shoes to get some beans to feed their kids. One such woman did that. When she came back, her kids were looking better than the rest of them. Just because they looked better than the rest of the people in the village, she had the tar beat out of her because they swore she was stealing food somewhere or hiding it and didn't let it up. She went home and the kids ate, and she laid down and never got up again. Her brother came to visit, said, "Where's my sister?" "Oh, she's there." "Where's the little girl?" "Oh, she's asleep upstairs." And both of them had passed away from starvation and from beatings. And the father had been shipped to Siberia, where he never returned home. Because, of course, you know what happened in Siberia. These are things that we should never forget. These are things which humans have done to other humans in the name of equity and power and control. I, for one, will never, ever forget stories that I've read and seen. Never allow this to happen. Ever. All right. I hope some of you had learned something from this, because not a lot of people know that the numbers were as high to 13 to 15 million of these people who were just, for no reason at all, just Ukrainians. And Stalin wanted them dead.
My grandmother was from Germany, and she married my mother's father, who'd grown up in the U.S. But her father was from the Urals. She told me stories about them killing wolves, hunting wolves and killing wolves to eat. And if they got caught doing that, they got shipped off. Now, this is wolves, mind you.
Some of the kids here were lucky, and they caught porcupines. And you can imagine how difficult it was just to get a meal to catch a porcupine and eat. But that tended to be the common thing, because everything else was gone.
That's like eating squirrel. There's just not enough there.
Yeah, plus all the violent quills.
No, absolutely. I can't imagine. I can't imagine living like that. I can't imagine. And people wonder why that's. There are a lot of us that do not want that type of socialism here. We've seen it not work everywhere else, but there's always people that think, well, it'll be different when we do it. So tonight, funnily enough, I am reading a story called "This Is Not a Place of Honor" by Queen Iakomani. I hope I said your name right. Over on Creepypasta. And I am going to copy this to the chat just in case anybody wants to read along. There's the link for this story. Let's go. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, huge numbers of formerly classified government documents were made available to the public for the very first time, such as the glut of these documents that even now, many of them have yet to be fully translated into English by historians and other scholars. One such document, a 246-page report for the Ministry of Medium Machine Building, later renamed the Ministry of Atomic Energy and Industry in the USSR, on the topic of radioactive waste disposal, was only translated last year. Although the document was very dryly written and received almost no attention from either the media or academia, it includes a description of an incident, which, if accepted at face value, undermines much of what is believed to be known of the history of life on Earth. The uranium-238 waste produced by nuclear power plants is a highly toxic radioactive substance, having a half-life of approximately 4.5 billion years. For this reason, such waste must be stored in the most remote, geologically stable locales possible, as it must be isolated from human populations and groundwater supplies, effectively forever. Towards this end, the government of Premier Alexei Kosygin initiated a project to identify an optimal site for uranium-238 disposal in 1975. Geological survey results were inputted into an algorithm that evaluated sites in the USSR based on 22 different criteria. Eventually, the team of researchers determined a list of 500 ideal disposal sites, including a bare and nondescript hillock in the Great Lakes Basin desert steppe, close to the border with Mongolia. In 1977, the ministry dispatched a team of geologists to the site to conduct a feasible study, hoping to gain a better idea of the local geological features. The scientists, led by one Grigory Lermontov, an academic at Leningrad State University, drilled a number of narrow boreholes into the surface, into which they dropped sounding probes equipped with ground-penetrating radar. To their surprise, their results indicated a smooth wall of metal, buried at a depth of approximately 1,400 meters. By collecting data at several more sites, they determined that this wall was roughly hemispherical, with a diameter of approximately 4 kilometers. They also discovered an anomalous signature beneath one of the points at which a sounding was made, which Lermontov, somewhat reluctantly, speculated may have been a door or an entryway. Intrigued by the discovery of such a large and regularly shaped structure deep beneath the ground, the ministry decided to investigate further, and so Lermontov returned to the site the following summer at the head of a somewhat large expedition. This time, armed with a large drill and a team of mining engineers. By August 5th, 1978, the drill had successfully bored a hole down to the metal surface, directly over the site of the supposed hatch. One member of the expedition, a Gregorian spelunker by the name of Amarin Chalovsky, hope I said that correctly, was then lowered into the hole on a mechanical winch apparatus. Together with several tanks of oxygen, some scientific equipment, a powerful flashlight, and a quartz 5 8mm movie camera. The film that Chalovsky collected is thought to be no longer in existence, but a few frames from it were reproduced as figures in the report. The first, taken while it's midway down the borehole, depicts the light from his flashlight reflecting off a gleaming metal surface far below. The second frame was taken after he had already reached the bottom of the pit, swept some of the remaining dirt off the metal with a gloved hand. This figure reveals that the metal was iridescent and highly reflective. The report notes that at that point, Chalovsky attempted to perform optical emission spectroscopy on the exposed metal, but found that he was unable to generate a spark between the metal and his electrode. As such, the precise chemical composition of the metal remains unknown. Sweeping the dirt off more of the metal, Chalovsky found that there was indeed an entry hatch, which was shaped like an equatorial triangle, roughly 1.5 meters to a side, a picture of which was included in the documents. The hatch was inscribed with a series of symbols or pictographs in a language that has yet to be deciphered. In the center of the hatch were 3 small circular indentions, also arranged into a triangle. At this point, Cholowski returned to the surface for further instructions, at which time he submitted his film to his superiors. The report notes that Lermontov, eager to get to the bottom of this mystery, sent a communique to his superiors in Moscow requesting that high-yield explosives and demolitions experts be dispatched to his site in order to blow open the hatch. Other unnamed members of the team offered objections to this direct approach, noting that they did not know the provenance of the object, nor the effect that an explosion might have upon its metal. But these objections were overruled. Given the remoteness of the site, Lermontov's superiors advised him that any logistical support would take approximately a week to arrive. The researchers were ordered to stay put until then. During this time, medical records included with the report indicate that the spelunker, Cholowski, was prescribed sedatives for the infirmary tent on 3 different occasions in order to treat unspecified nocturnal disturbances. It is perhaps noteworthy that there is no record of Cholowski having prescribed such medication prior to his descent into the borehole, but his mental state was not described. What is mentioned is that approximately 6 days after his initial descent, Cholowski decided to do it again, late at night, and without any authorization or support. While almost nothing is known of his individual psychology and temperament, it seems remarkable that an experienced spelunker would engage in such reckless behavior. Indeed, together with his previously mentioned treatment for nocturnal disturbances, it does not seem unreasonable to speculate that Cholowski may not have been in his right mind at that point, and that indeed he may have been sleepwalking. Whatever his motivation, Cholowski apparently succeeded in rappelling down the side of the borehole, as the next morning the Soviet scientists were shocked to discover that the hatch at the bottom of the pit had somehow been opened. Moreover, the Gregorian explorer had apparently purloined a movie camera, a reel of film, and several pieces of scientific equipment, including a Geiger counter, to take with him on his descent. It remains unclear how he managed to pry open the hatch. Attempts to establish radio contact with Cholowski proved unsuccessful for nearly 2 hours. Then, just before a rescue party was to be lowered in after him, he was seen to emerge from out of the hemisphere, dragging a medium-sized ceramic canister. The hatch immediately closed once again behind him, after which he seemed to collapse upon the hemisphere's metal surface. Lermontov then dispatched his rescue party to bring the spelunker with them out of the borehole. Cholowski remained alive for a further 3 hours following his rescue, but spent this time in a delirious state, occasionally babbling unintelligible but unable to answer questions about either his inexplicable behavior or what he had found within the dome. Physically, he showed symptoms of severe radiation poisoning, with burns covering much of his body, in addition to other abnormalities. In particular, Mr. Cholowski was described as suffering from extreme necrosis of the lower legs, with the bones in his feet being described as almost chalk-like. One doctor noted in the report that if she had not known better, she would have concluded that Cholowski had been suffering from extremely poor circulation in his lower extremities for months or even years. It should be noted that neither necrosis nor osteoporosis are known symptoms of radiation exposure. The report does not speculate as to the cause, but notes that the results of post-mortem toxicology tests remain pending at the time of this writing. Unfortunately, the film captured by Mr. Cholofsky fared little better than the spelunker himself. The report notes that most of the film reel showed damaged characteristics of exposure to high-energy gamma radiation. Nevertheless, a few segments of the film did manage to survive with only minor damage, and the material contained therein is telling. Notably, the report includes descriptions of 2 brief clips appearing to show the interior of the chamber, as well as frames from these clips. The first clip is approximately 8 seconds long and begins with a shot of the distinctive triangular porthole, seen from below and illuminated with a flashlight. The interior wall of the dome appears to be made of the same iridescent metal as the exterior. The cinematographer, presumably Cholofsky himself, then pans the camera down to reveal a room full of containers of various shapes and sizes, ranging from standard steel drums bearing radioactivity warning symbols and text in Latin, Cyrillic, simplified Chinese, Hindi, and Arabic writing systems, to more elaborate containers of unknown material and manufacture, bearing unrecognizable labels and unidentified scripts. The second clip is 19 seconds long and a good deal more difficult to decipher. The report describes the camera work as extremely unsteady and prone to unaccountable optical distortions, but it seems to show the cinematographer attempting to make a rapid egress from the chamber, scrambling over fallen containers towards a cord dangling from the hatch. The ceramic canister carried out of the dome by Cholofsky was also recovered from the borehole. This canister was cylindrical in form, 16 centimeters high by 25 centimeters in diameter, and was identified as being a standard rated medium-sized drum for radioactive waste disposal. Upon analysis of spectrographic data, this drum was found to contain uranium-238 and lead-206, as well as trace quantities of several other isotopes, most notably uranium-34 and thorium-230, all of which are along the decay pathway for uranium-238. The radioactive concentrations of these elements indicate that the canister had been in place for approximately 2.1 billion years. The report concludes by noting that further research will be necessary before drawing any conclusions as to the nature of this incident. The provenance of the hemisphere, the contents of the other containers, or how such artifacts, including some of manifestly recent design, could have been underground for so many years. Mention is made of a forthcoming follow-up report from a second expedition, but a record of this report has not yet been discovered in the declassified literature. One final note should be made concerning the aforementioned babbles made by Tchaikovsky. In the final hours of his life, apparently thinking that the spelunker may have been speaking in his native Gregorian, academic Lermontov ordered that his utterances be recorded on a Choctaw reel-to-reel tape recorder for later translation. Whilst that hope proved forlorn, the recording is still in existence, and it was recently discovered, quite by accident, when attempting to play this recording, that one of Mr. Cholofsky's utterances was, however, improbably intelligible in English when played backwards. The statement read, "This is not a place of honor." It is not known whether the subterranean dome and its mysterious contents still exist today.
I love stories like that. That's cool.
Yes, absolutely.
Seriously cool.
I want more. Do you guys want more? If you guys want more of that, throw one in chat. I will definitely attempt to find more. She's a good writer.
Pop a 1 in there for me too. That was really cool.
I definitely want more. I'll see if I can find more of this.
That reminds me of, and I don't know if because it started off, I was kind of thinking this direction. Did you ever hear of the Hole to Hell?
No.
It's supposedly, and again, chat's going to correct me where I'm wrong here. It wasn't too long ago where they were going for some records there in Russia to see how far they can drill down, and it came close to 7 miles down. Somewhere between 5 and 7, I think. And they were able to get sounds out of there. Why they did it, I don't recall. I used to know the story better. But when they recorded it, they called it the hellhole because the sounds coming out literally sounded like people being tortured in hell. Screams, bellows, cries for help. It's supposed to be a true story too.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to bring that.
It's just a short story. It's not long enough to fill for one of these. Maybe I could do 1 or 2 of them at once. But yeah, that's actually a real deal. As far as I know, the details have been embellished here and there. Some of them are correct, some of them are not. But it's still called the hellhole. I'll have to look up its location, all that fun stuff. But yeah, that's the story.
Heck yeah. Hell yeah, brother. So guys, thank you so very much for being with us here tonight and listening to us prattle on about fact and fiction. We will be back week after next. I will be gone next Thursday. I know Adega didn't know about that because I just remembered because I hadn't talked to him about it yet.
No!
But I will have the best of Adega Outlaw.
Oh, jeez.
So we're going to have the best of Adega Outlaw. It will be pre-recorded. It will show up as a premiere so you guys can talk and chat and hang out and watch it. That will be set up for next Thursday. So we're going to do the very best of Adega Outlaw on 7.
Yeah, I know which one you're putting on there last.
Tinkering I must be tinkering. I must go. Steam engines to build. Yes.
And the finest blonde hair I could find.
Yes.
She was wasting her life anyway. She won't miss it at the bottom of the river.
Oh my God, I love it. Don't miss out. Best of Adega Outlaw next week, guys. You guys have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, chat, for being here. Thank you for hanging out with us. And we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.